So imagine, if you will, stepping into a time machine.
Okay, I'm with you.
Right. So you travel back exactly 100 years, and you step out onto this bustling city street.
Uh-huh.
There are absolutely no smartphones in sight. There's no Wi-Fi networks. The air just smells of, like, coal and exhaust.
Classic 1920s.
Exactly. And you walk up to a wooden newsstand, you hand over a few coins, and you buy a cheap, garish pulp magazine.
Right.
And you flip past the cover, you skip past the stories, and you go right to the back pages. And as you're reading the fine print, you suddenly realize you are looking at the internet.
It really is. It's like a perfect miniature mirror.
Yeah, it's this miniature mirror of modern digital culture just hiding in plain sight in the year 1923.
Which is just wild to think about.
It is. So today, for you listening, we are opening up a massive stack of research on a deep dive into something called the Eyrie.
Right, the letters call.
Yeah, the letters column of the legendary pulp magazine Weird Tales. And our mission today is to figure out how crowdsourcing and, parasocial relationships were basically invented decades before anyone even had a computer.
Yeah, and I think we really need to set the stage first for what we mean by a pulp magazine.
Oh, definitely.
Because that term, it gets thrown around a lot today as just a generic synonym for, like, cheap fiction.
Like just anything trashy.
Exactly. But in 1923, it was a very specific physical object. It had its own cultural weight.
Right, because of the paper.
Yeah, the term pulp comes from the actual paper it was printed on. It was this cheap, untrimmed wood pulp.
So it wasn't nice to hold.
Not at all.
Sure.
These were not the glossy, respected literary magazines of the era.
Yeah.
Like the Saturday Evening Post or Harper.
The highbrow stuff.
Right. Those were for the high-minded establishment. The pulps, on the other hand, they were ragged. They literally smelled like cheap ink. And the paper would actually crumble. Like, it would yellow and fall apart if you just left it in the sun for too long. They were considered incredibly lowbrow.
Right. So this is basically the disposable media of its day. You read it on the train, and then you just leave it on the bench for the next guy.
Exactly. It was totally ephemeral. And Weird Tales, which debuted in March 1923, by the way.
Right.
And miraculously survived until September 1954, which is a huge run.
Yeah. Over 30 years.
Yeah. They were trying to carve out this very specific, weird little niche in this already lowbrow market.
Right. Doing horror and fantasy.
Exactly. The macabre. Okay. Stuff that mainstream publishers just absolutely wouldn't touch.
But the reason we're looking at Weird Tales today, it isn't actually because of the fiction itself.
No, not at all.
It's because of that letters column at the very back.
Right.
We are looking at the mechanics of how a community was, artificially engineered from the top down.
Right.
And then how it organically took on a life of its own and eventually just overpowered the very people who built it.
Which is such a fascinating trajectory.
So, okay, let's unpack this artificial engineering aspect.
Sure.
Because when you look at the origins of the Eyrie, the timeline is incredibly suspicious.
It really is.
According to the sources we have, this letters column wasn't some afterthought, right?
No, not at all.
Like, it wasn't something they added in issue 10 because they suddenly had, overflowing mailbags from adoring fans.
Right, it was there from the jump.
Exactly. It was there in issue 1, March 1923.
It was foundational to the architecture of the magazine.
Right. And it opens with this grand editorial fanfare, supposedly written by the founding editor, this guy named Edwin Baird.
We're like Baird.
And he's inviting readers to write in, debate the stories, share their thoughts. But here is the massive red flag.
Yeah, the planted letter.
Yes. He prints a letter in that very first column, the inaugural letter in the inaugural issue.
Right.
It's from a guy named Anthony M. Rudd. But think about it. How does a reader send in a letter about a magazine that hasn't even been published yet?
Well, they don't. That's the trick.
Right.
Anthony M. Rudd wasn't a regular reader just, walking up to a newsstand.
So who was he?
He was a professional author. And he was writing this letter before the magazine ever even went to the printing press.
So we are talking about a completely manufactured interaction here.
100%.
Edwin Baird is sitting in his editorial office in Chicago. He's looking at this blank page designated for reader letters, and he just realizes he doesn't have any actual readers yet.
Right, because it doesn't exist yet.
So he just calls up an author buddy and says, hey, write me a letter so I don't look desperate.
Pretty much, yeah.
It immediately makes me think of, modern content creation.
Oh, absolutely.
It is exactly like someone launching a brand new Discord server. You don't just open it up to the public when it's totally empty and quiet.
Right, that's just awkward.
Yeah. You secretly have your 5 best friends join first. You tell them to chat nonstop, post memes, argue about something completely trivial.
Just to make it look active.
Exactly. So that when the first real users actually click the invite link, the room already feels alive. You have to seed the environment.
You really do. And, what's fascinating here is the psychology of the blank space.
What do you mean?
Well, it's terrifying for community building. If Baird had just printed an empty page with a mailing address and said, please write to us, he would have received absolute silence.
Because nobody wants to go first.
Exactly. Humans are incredibly hesitant to be the first person on a dance floor. You need scaffolding.
Right.
But what Baird did by utilizing Anthony M. Rudd specifically, it's even more layered than just faking a crowd.
How so? Like, why Rudd in particular?
You have to look at who Rudd was in the context of the 1920s literary network.
Okay.
He wasn't just a guy who wrote stories. The sources describe him as acting informally as a talent scout.
Oh, really?
Yeah, he was an advocate for this new magazine among writers down in the American South.
I see.
Because, the 1920s didn't have social media algorithms to push new content.
Right. No Twitter or anything.
Exactly. Information travel through regional literary circles, word of mouth, and postal correspondence. Rudd was basically a regional hype man.
Oh, so he was the guy working the physical network on the ground.
Precisely. And by printing his letter first, Baird accomplishes two massive psychological shifts for the magazine.
Okay, what's the first one?
First, he provides a stylistic template for the actual readers.
Ah, like showing them the ropes.
Yeah, he shows them how to write a letter to this specific magazine. The tone, the enthusiasm, the kind of feedback that's expected.
Right, setting the vibe.
Exactly.
Yeah.
But second, and fundamentally more important, he immediately and permanently blurred the line between the creator and the consumer.
Because the very first voice a consumer reads in their own designated section is a creator.
Yes. Baird didn't put Rudd's letter on some special, author's note page at the front of the magazine.
Right, he buried it in the back.
It put him in the back, in the mud with the audience. The space was never segregated right from day one. It established this precedent that the people writing the stories and the people reading the stories occupy the exact same intellectual real estate.
That's a great way to put it.
It proved that this wasn't just a one-way broadcasting system. They weren't just selling a collection of ghost stories.
You're selling a membership.
Exactly, membership to a club.
Yeah.
And Rudd, as the talent scout, he was the guy standing by the door just waving you inside.
And it sets a precedent that the barrier to entry is just non-existent. Like, if you write a good enough letter, your name is printed in the exact same font, on the exact same cheap pulp paper as the professional writers.
Yeah, which is huge.
That is a hell of an incentive for a reader to engage.
Yeah.
And it clearly worked, because while Rudd was the artificial spark, the organic fire that followed was massive.
It really was.
Real readers actually started writing in, and the people who emerged from that organic readership completely changed the landscape of modern literature.
Yeah, the most prominent example being, of course, H.P. Lovecraft.
Right. Let's talk about the Lovecraft phenomenon, because this completely rewired how I view him.
It's a very different side of him.
I mean, even if you've never picked up a pulp magazine in your life, you know H.P. Lovecraft.
Oh, sure. Cthulhu, tentacles, all that.
Cosmic horror, the creeping dread of the unknown. He is historically positioned as this monolithic, untouchable literary figure.
A total recluse.
Exactly, a recluse. But our research brief highlights a timeline that just shatters that myth.
It really does.
Lovecraft is first published in the letters column of Weird Tales in September 1923.
And that date is highly significant.
It's vital, because his very first actual work of fiction for the magazine, a story called Dagon, it did not appear until a full month later, in October 1923.
Right.
And over his relationship with the magazine, he contributed 12 distinct letters to the Eyrie.
12 letters is a lot.
It is. His entry point into this massive cultural institution wasn't as some visionary artist handing down a masterpiece from the mountain. His entry point was as a commenter.
He was a correspondent before he was a contributor.
But wait, so what does this all mean? I have to push back on this a little bit.
Okay, go ahead.
Because it contradicts the entire established mythos of the guy.
True.
Lovecraft was notoriously misanthropic. He was an isolated, highly prejudiced recluse living in Providence, Rhode Island. He barely left his house.
Right.
You're telling me he was basically networking in a comment section?
That's exactly what he was doing.
Are we sure these letters weren't just standard, dry, letter to the editor fare? Like, how does an isolated guy like that cross the line into actual socializing?
Well, that is the perfect question to ask, because We have to understand how a letters column functioned in the 1920s versus, say, a comment section today.
Okay, what's the difference?
Today, leaving a comment takes 3 seconds. It is impulsive. You just type it on your phone and hit send.
Right, it's instant.
But in 1923, writing a letter to the Eyrie required significant effort.
I bet.
You had to read the magazine, formulate a coherent thesis about what you liked or hated, type or handwrite it out.
And then actually mail it.
Yeah, you had to buy a 2-cent stamp, which was on money back then, and physically mail it to Chicago.
Wow.
Then you had to wait months to see if it was printed and wait even longer to see if another reader wrote a rebuttal.
Oh, wow. So it's like a slow motion debate.
Exactly. And for someone like Lovecraft who felt really alienated from physical society, this slow motion text-based environment was the perfect medium.
Ah, that makes sense. It was safe for him.
Yes, he wasn't casually firing off one-liners. He was writing hyper-intellectual, deeply opinionated treatises on aesthetics, cosmic dread, and the nature of weird fiction.
He was going all out.
Oh yeah, he was arguing with other readers. He was actively establishing a persona.
So it wasn't just, hey, great issue, guys. He was actively shaping the intellectual debate of the entire community.
He was dominating it. And think about the psychological effect that has on the rest of the readership.
What do you mean?
Well, when we talk about the untouchable artistic genius, we imagine someone descending from the mountain with finished product, totally detached from the audience.
Right.
But Lovecraft entered Weird Tales as a peer.
Oh, I see.
By the time Dagon was published in October 1923, the most dedicated readers of the Eyrie already knew his name.
They already knew his vibe.
Exactly. They knew his vocabulary, they knew his obsessions, they knew his worldview.
So he had already softened the ground because, I mean, his writing is incredibly bizarre and dense.
Very dense, yeah.
If Dagon had just appeared out of nowhere, an average reader in 1923 might have just rejected it as incomprehensible nonsense.
They probably would have.
But because they knew him from the letters column, it wasn't some strange transmission from an alien. It was a story by that weird, highly articulate guy from the back pages.
Precisely. It primed the audience to accept his fiction. They didn't see Dagon as an imposition by a stranger. They saw it as a contribution from one of their own.
That is so smart.
And for anyone listening to this who has creative ambitions today, I mean, this is an incredible historical validation of a very modern strategy.
Absolutely.
Active participation in a community is the ultimate launchpad. You don't have to break down the door from the outside if you're already sitting on the couch inside the house, talking to the guests.
It is the 1920s equivalent of being highly active on a niche subreddit.
Totally.
Like, you're dropping really insightful, well-researched comments for months, and then one day you casually post, hey guys, I finally wrote a novel based on the stuff we always talk about. Here's the link.
And people buy it.
Yeah, the community supports it because you are part of the tribe.
And that tribal loyalty is incredibly powerful. But as we move forward in the timeline of Weird Tales, we see that this dynamic didn't just stop at fans becoming authors.
Oh no, it gets wilder.
The boundaries dissolved entirely. Once the readers realized they had a voice, they began to test the limits of that voice. Which brings us to the moment the power dynamics of the publishing industry completely inverted.
Okay, here's where it gets really interesting. This is genuinely my favorite quirk in the entire stack of research we have today.
It's a great story.
Because we aren't just talking about a space where fans could, cheer for their favorite stories or debate themes. We're talking about the Eyrie becoming an actual mechanism for editorial control.
Right.
The readers literally grabbed the steering wheel of the magazine.
And they did it in a way that defied every standard practice of the 1920s publishing industry.
Okay, so let's set this up. The sources tell us about a specific event involving the founding editor, Edwin Baird, and a reader from Amarillo, Texas.
Right.
The research brief explicitly describes a letter this reader sent in as barely literate.
It was a mess.
Yeah, it is poorly written, it's full of grammatical errors, just a massive mess of a letter. But buried inside this barely literate rant is a pitch for a story idea.
Right.
A very raw concept about a transparent ghost. Now, in any normal publishing house, a poorly spelled letter from an amateur gets tossed right into the wastebasket. Because the editor is God. The editor makes the decisions. But Baird doesn't throw it away.
No, he doesn't.
He prints it in the Eyrie, and he asks the audience a direct question. Should we publish a story based on this idea?
He put the editorial mandate to a public vote.
Which is insane.
It really is.
And the readers overwhelmingly vote yes. They want the transparent ghost story, so the magazine actually commissions it.
They went out and paid for it.
Yeah, a professional writer is hired, and the resulting story, titled The Transparent Ghost, runs as a massive 3-part serial.
A serial, meaning it took up prime real estate across 3 separate issues of the magazine.
Yeah.
This was not a small commitment.
Right, but before we get into the psychology of that, I have to stop and point out a massive, hilarious chronological glitch in the historical record that is in our sources.
Oh, the dates.
Yes. The sources state that this barely literate letter from Amarillo was printed in late 1924.
Right.
But the resulting story, The Transparent Ghost, reportedly ran in early 1924.
It's a glaring contradiction in the timeline.
I mean, how does that even work? We are either looking at a massive typo by the historians who archived these pulps, or Weird Tales was literally publishing time-traveling ghosts.
Right.
Like, the ghost was so transparent, it phased backward through the space-time continuum. If the letter suggesting the story comes out in November, how on earth is the story printed in February of the same year?
Well, this raises an important question about how these historical archives are actually built and, the reality of 1920s publishing logistics.
Okay, lay it on me.
Magazines back then heavily post-dated their issues.
Post-dated?
Yeah, so an issue labeled December might actually hit newsstands in mid-October.
Oh, why do they do that?
This was done so the magazine looked fresh on the newsstand for a longer period of time.
Ah, so it wouldn't look expired if it sat there for a month.
Exactly. Add to that the sheer chaos of a struggling pulp magazine's editorial office files lost, letters misplaced, publication schedules delayed by months just because they couldn't afford to pay the printer.
Right, they were running on fumes.
So it is highly likely the archivist mapping this out decades later simply transposed the dates based on cover months, rather than the actual street dates.
Okay, so it's likely an archival typo born out of the messy reality of cheap publishing.
That is likely, yeah.
But honestly, even if we strip away the time travel anomaly, the core event remains true. And the sheer logistics of crowdsourcing a story in 1924 are just baffling to me.
It's a lot of work.
Like, how do you run a poll by snail mail?
It requires an immense amount of patience and a willingness to just let audience dictate your production schedule.
Yeah.
Think about the friction involved here. Baird prints the question, should we do this?
Right.
The reader buys the magazine, reads the question, decides they care enough to vote, writes a physical letter saying yes, buys postage, and mails it.
And that's just one person.
Exactly. Baird's office has to physically receive bags of mail, open every single envelope, tally the votes on a chalkboard or a ledger, make the final decision. And then they have to hire a writer, wait for the writer to actually draft a 3-part serial, edit it, typeset it, and finally print it.
That is exhausting just to hear.
Right. That feedback loop, which takes like 24 hours on a modern YouTube poll, took the better part of a year in 1924.
Which makes the fact that they actually did it even more profound.
Absolutely.
It wasn't some cheap gimmick they could pull off in an afternoon. It was a massive logistical undertaking. Why would an editor in a top-down industry cede that much power to the audience? Like, why let a badly written letter dictate your budget?
Because Baird understood that engagement is the ultimate currency of community.
Engagement currency.
Yes. Just like today's algorithms prioritize high engagement content over high quality content, the 1920s voting mechanism bypassed traditional literary gatekeepers in favor of raw audience enthusiasm.
Even if it was barely literate.
Exactly. The letter from Amarillo might have been barely literate, but it struck a nerve. And by putting it to a vote, Baird transformed the Eyrie from a passive suggestion box, where complaints usually just go die, into an interactive mechanism.
It's the 1920s version of Reddit.
Totally.
It is literally a subreddit upvoting a random writing prompt so intensely that a publisher actually funds it.
Exactly. And the psychological impact on the reader is immense.
I can imagine.
When they see The Transparent Ghost hit the newsstands, they realize, wait, we aren't just consumers here. We are the board of directors. We commissioned this.
Right.
That level of empowerment creates a fierce, almost territorial loyalty to the publication. If you helped build the house, you aren't going to let it burn down.
But that brings up a really crucial point about human behavior.
Right.
Once the readers realized they had this editorial control, they became highly protective of the magazine.
Very protective.
And when humans become protective of a space, they demand stability. If the content of the stories is constantly shifting, changing, and chaotic, which weird fiction is the physical layout of the magazine couldn't be.
Exactly.
If the Eyrie is their clubhouse, it needs to look and feel like home every single time they open it.
Which transitions us perfectly into the visual design of the column and, the psychological necessity of anchors in a volatile environment.
Right, the user interface of the 1920s.
I love that comparison.
So according to the sources, there was an illustrator named Andrew Brosnatch. In the mid-1920s, he did a lot of covers and interior art for Weird Tales, but he specifically decorated the Eyrie.
Right.
He created this distinct decorative header for the letters column. Now, around November 1924, Edwin Baird leaves, and a new editor takes over, a man named Farnsworth Wright.
A very important figure.
Under Wright, the column really solidifies into this beloved feature.
Yeah.
But here's the crazy part. Brosnatch's decorative header survives the transition.
It does.
In fact, it endures for decades. The sources report it lasted all the way to the magazine's final issue in September 1954. 30 years of the exact same header art.
3 decades of visual consistency in an industry that is completely defined by constant visual reinvention.
It is wild, and it immediately made me think of the visual language of the early internet.
Oh, absolutely.
Think about your favorite subreddit banner or a classic forum avatar from some niche message board that you checked every day after school in the early 2000s.
Nostalgic.
Yeah. The internet changes at 1,000,000 miles an hour, but that one specific banner stays the exact same for 10 years. And seeing it instantly lowers your blood pressure.
It really does.
It tells your brain you are back in your clubhouse, you are safe here. I imagine it was the exact same feeling in 1930. No matter what crazy, avant-garde, terrifying monster was on the cover of Weird Tales that month, a reader could flip to the back pages, see Brosnatch's header, and know they were home.
That is a very astute comparison because it really speaks to how humans navigate abstract spaces. Let's break down why visual consistency matters so much in community building, especially in a genre like weird fiction.
Okay.
A magazine like Weird Tales is inherently chaotic by design. You have different authors every month, vastly different prose styles, shifting themes from cosmic horror to high fantasy to pulpy sci-fi.
Right. You never know what you're going to get.
The content is explicitly designed to be unsettling and alienating.
The whole point is to make you uncomfortable.
Exactly. So Farnsworth Wright, who's a brilliant editor, recognized that if the stories are pushing people out of their comfort zones, the letters column must do the opposite.
Ah.
It must be the emotional heartbeat, the safe harbor. By keeping Brosnatch's art unchanged for 30 years, Wright provided a visual anchor in a sea of weirdness.
That makes total sense.
Think about how universally jarring it is today when a major social media platform pushes a UI redesign. Even if the new design is technically better, people lose their minds.
Oh, absolutely. There is absolute visceral rage when a button moves 2 pixels to the left. People act like their actual house has been broken into.
Because psychologically it has. Humans are deeply territorial. We map our environments, whether they're physical or textual, using landmarks.
Right.
In a digital space, the UI is the landmark. In a 1920s pulp magazine, the header art and the typography are the landmarks.
That's fascinating.
Weird Tales knew not to mess with the visual identity of their most intimate space. That unchanged header by Andrew Brosnatch was a silent promise to the reader.
What was it, the prompt?
It basically said, the world outside is changing, the stories in these pages are terrifying, but this conversation, this community, this is permanent.
It's the campfire that never moves even if the dark woods around it keep changing.
Exactly.
So we have this permanent visual clubhouse established. We have readers who know they hold actual editorial power through voting. We have an environment where a fan can become an author if they write a good enough letter.
All the pieces are in place.
So who exactly was hanging out around this campfire by the time the 1930s rolled around? Because the demographics of this column shifted into something truly extraordinary.
It really became arguably the most important proving ground in the history of speculative fiction.
The sources show that by the 1930s, the Eyrie reads like an absolute who's who of emerging science fiction and horror fandom.
It's incredible to look back at the names.
We have a specific record of a 1936 issue. In the single issue, you have letters printed from Donald A. Wollheim and Robert Bloch.
Wow.
Now, to you and me, those names are literary titans. Robert Bloch wrote Psycho, the book that became the Hitchcock film that changed cinema forever.
A massive figure.
But in 1936, they were just teenagers.
Yeah, literal kids.
They were literal high school kids, and their fan mail was printed physically side by side with letters from professional, established, highly paid contributors like Seabury Quinn.
It's amazing.
I have to ask you, what does that actually do to a teenager's brain? To young Robert Bloch, holding this cheap-smelling pulp magazine in his hands, seeing his own thoughts printed in the exact same font right next to a famous working author.
Well, if we connect this to the bigger picture, it completely rewires their understanding of what is possible.
Yeah.
If you look at the mechanics of traditional publishing prior to spaces like the Eyrie, there was a very distinct velvet rope.
Right.
Authors were the VIPs inside the club, and readers were the masses standing outside on the sidewalk hoping to catch a glimpse. You consumed what was given to you.
And you were quiet about it.
Exactly. But in the Eyrie, Farnsworth Wright removed the velvet rope.
He let everyone in.
By flattening the hierarchy, by printing the teenager and the seasoned professional shoulder to shoulder in the exact same physical column format, the magazine did something incredibly subversive.
What's that?
It told the amateur, your voice is just as valid as the professionals.
But there has to be a catch, right? Because if you validate a teenager like that, if you tell them they're equals, doesn't that just invite a flood of terrible, immature writing?
That is the genius of the system, though. With that validation comes intense, unspoken expectation.
Oh, I see.
It's a concept we can call mentorship by proximity. If you are a 16-year-old Robert Bloch, and you know that your letter is going to sit physically next to a letter by Seabury Quinn or H.P. Lovecraft.
You can't sound stupid.
Exactly. You are not going to send in a sloppy, half-baked thought.
No.
You're going to ruthlessly edit your own letter.
Right.
You are going to hone your prose. You're going to formulate a genuine structural argument about narrative pacing or thematic dread.
You're forced to level up just to survive the environment.
Exactly. The magazine treated these teenagers' opinions with the exact same physical page weight as the professionals, and in response, the teenagers rose to the occasion.
It's so cool.
It trained a generation of future legends by treating them as peers before they'd even earned the title.
Wow.
They learned how to be professional writers by arguing with professional writers in a public forum. It was a masterclass in extracting latent potential from an audience.
It is the ultimate incubator.
Truly.
But this specific 1936 issue we're talking about, it wasn't just a place for eager amateurs like Bloch to flex their intellectual muscles.
No, it wasn't.
The sources reveal that this specific issue was also the site of a profound real-world tragedy. And I think this is the moment where the Eyrie proves that it had moved far beyond just a marketing tool or a writing workshop and into a genuine community dealing with the reality of life and death.
You were referring to the passing of Robert E. Howard.
Yes. For those who might not know, Robert E. Howard was the creator of Conan the Barbarian.
A legend in his own right.
He was a massive foundational pillar of the pulp fantasy world, and he died tragically, taking his own life in June 1936.
Yeah, it was a huge shock.
Our sources note that the same 1936 issue of the Eyrie that featured Bloch and Wollheim also included tributes to Howard. Readers, critics, and fellow authors poured into the letters column to praise the literary value of his work. They were eulogizing him in the exact same physical pages where his fiction had originally appeared.
And we really need to pause and examine the emotional weight of this because it bridges the gap between historical print and modern digital culture perfectly.
It completely drops the humor for me because the parallel is just so direct and so emotionally heavy.
It really is.
When a beloved YouTuber or a Twitch streamer or a podcaster dies today, what happens? The internet stops.
Yeah, the whole community freezes.
Their subreddit, their Discord, or the comments section of their final video instantly transforms into a digital memorial wall.
Yep.
Tens of thousands of people who have never met this creator in real life, who've never even met each other, gather in this digital space to share how much this person meant to them, how their content got them through hard times.
It's very powerful.
It is staggering to realize that fans were doing this exact same thing, utilizing the exact same emotional mechanisms in 1936.
It is a profound historical mirror, and it demands that we reevaluate a term that gets thrown around a lot today.
What term?
The parasocial relationship.
Ah, right.
We often talk about parasocial relationships as if they are a toxic byproduct of modern technology. A parasocial relationship, for those unfamiliar, is a one-sided relationship where a fan feels a deep, intimate connection to a media figure, Well, the media figure doesn't actually know the fan exists.
Right, like we usually view this through the lens of Instagram influencers or TikTok stars.
Exactly, where the intimacy is manufactured through a camera lens.
Right, it's often viewed as fake or unhealthy.
But this 1936 issue of Weird Tales proves that the emotional reality of these relationships is deeply human, and it has existed long before screens.
That's a really good point.
The readers of Weird Tales felt they knew Robert E. Howard, not just because they read his Conan stories, but because they shared the Eyrie with him.
Well, because they were in the same clubhouse.
Yes. They occupied the same intellectual real estate. They read his letters, they debated his ideas, they existed in the same space.
Because the line between creator and consumer had been blurred from day one, like we talked about with Anthony M. Rudd. Howard wasn't some distant celebrity. He was a guy in the room with them.
Precisely. When he died, it wasn't just a loss for American literature. It was a devastating loss for the clubhouse.
Right.
And processing that grief publicly, collectively, and specifically in the venue of the author's work gave the readership a crucial psychological outlet.
I can see that.
If you are a fan of weird fiction in 1936, you might be the only person in your physical town who reads this stuff.
Oh, wow.
If you try to mourn Robert E. Howard to your family at the dinner table, they won't understand. You have to go to the Eyrie.
You have to go to where your people are?
Yes. The collective mourning validated their grief. It proved that the community wasn't just a cynical marketing gimmick invented by Edwin Baird 13 years earlier to sell more magazine.
It became real.
It evolved into a genuine emotional support system. The bonds forged in ink were just as real to these people as the bonds forged in physical space.
It is absolutely staggering to think about.
It is.
I want to take a breath here because we've covered so much ground today, from the cynical invention of a letters column to the genuine, heartfelt mourning of a literary icon.
We really have.
I want to steer us toward wrapping up these incredible insights and really looking at the grand design of what we've unpacked today, because the through line connecting all of this is just undeniable.
The precedents for everything we do online today are all laid out in these crumbling pulp pages.
The Eyrie is the ultimate prototype. It is the architectural blueprint for the parasocial author-fan relationships that modern social media and podcasting have completely formalized.
It really is.
It offers a ready-made structural precedent for any modern audio or video format, including the very deep dive you are listening to right now, that is built around direct correspondence and community participation. I want to speak directly to you, listening right now. When you listen to a Q&A show, when you vote on a Patreon poll to decide what video a creator should make next, or when you fiercely debate a fan theory in a comment section on YouTube, you aren't doing something new.
Not at all.
You are walking directly in the footsteps of the 1923 Weird Tales readership. You are participating in a century-old tradition.
And that is the ultimate thesis we must draw from this stack of research.
Let's hear it.
Knowledge and community are inextricably intertwined. You cannot have one without the other in a lasting medium.
Right.
The brilliance of the Eyrie, the reason Weird Tales survived for decades while hundreds of other pulp magazines went bankrupt and turned to dust, was realizing a fundamental truth about human storytelling.
Which is what?
That the stories themselves, the horror, the sci-fi, the fantasy, they were just the campfire.
Oh, I like that.
They were the excuse for people to gather in the dark. But the letters column, that was the conversation happening around the campfire.
Yeah.
And the conversation is what keeps people coming back long after the fire has burned down to embers. If you only provide content, people consume it and leave. If you provide a space to discuss the content, people move in and build a home.
The stories bring you in, but the community makes you stay.
Exactly.
It is such a powerful realization, and it completely reframes how I look at every comment section on the internet. But before we go, I want to leave you, the listener, with a brand new angle to ponder.
Okay.
Something we haven't deeply covered yet, but that builds on every single mechanism we've discussed today. We've talked a lot about how empowering this was for the readers, how great it was for fans to vote, to participate, to become authors themselves.
Right.
But take a moment to put yourself in a completely different pair of shoes. Imagine being a professional working author in the late 1920s.
A tough gig.
This is your livelihood. You slave over a typewriter, you craft a highly edited, deeply personal, sophisticated story, and you submit it to Weird Tales. And your story gets rejected by editor Edwin Baird. Why? Specifically, to make room in the budget for a 3-part serial about a transparent ghost, pitched by a barely literate reader from Texas simply because the comment section upvoted it.
A truly horrifying thought for a professional whose rent depends on publication.
Did the existence of the Eyrie actually make authors feel more connected to their fans, or did it absolutely terrify them?
That's a great question.
Did established writers lie awake at night realizing that the inmates were suddenly running the asylum, that their artistic careers, their financial stability, were suddenly at the mercy of a popularity contest in the back pages of a cheap pulp magazine?
It's entirely possible.
Did crowdsourcing democratize art, or did it just introduce the tyranny of the crowd? So next time you leave a comment on your favorite creator's page, asking them to change their content or demanding they make a specific video, ask yourself, are you just supporting them or are you becoming their editor?
A fantastic and slightly chilling question to leave them with.
Thank you so much for joining us on this massive exploration of the internet before the internet. Keep questioning the media you consume, keep looking for the historical roots of the things you love, and remember that even in 1923, there was always someone ready to argue in the comments. We'll catch you on the next Deep Dive.